How often do GMB re-verifications get approved when a business changes their address from service area to physical location? And what do you do if the GBP verification gets denied or suspended? How often do they get approved? I don't know. If it's a real valid business location, then I tell my tree service clients that I recommend that they do it. But every time we've ever had a re-verification or a suspension occur from a real valid business location, we've not had any trouble getting them reinstated. Sometimes it takes a while. Usually the re-verifications aren't hard, but the suspensions usually take time. And that's, but honestly, I've had a number of recent, and it's probably been 3 months since the last time we did it, but typically what we'll do before prompt or request the tree contractor or suggest. I mean, I might suggest it, but I tell them if they agree to change from a hidden street address to a published street address, then I say before we make that change, though, we need to prepare for it. Like basically set the stage by doing some things to provide validation signals before we attempt the switch, right? Before we make the change from a unpublished street address to a published street address, we want to make sure there's enough supporting evidence online to support that it does indeed that business resides at that location. That goes right back to precisely the first question. The more supporting branded external assets that we can create that mention name, address, phone number, and website, or some combination of those data points. In this case, if you were trying to go from an unpublished street address to a published street address, then you obviously want the street address being published, right? So you want that out there. So for example, if it's a unpublished street address tree contractor, and I suggest to them I'm always transparent. I give them that warning up front, like, listen, we're rolling the dice here. This is going to be a bit risky. It always is. Most of the time, we're able to get the change accepted without re-verification or suspension. But sometimes it does trigger re-verification. And in some rare cases, it triggers suspension. And if that's the case, if it's re-verification, as long as you have a valid business location and I confirm all of that with them ahead of time, then we should be fine. But if it suspends it, then it could be a bit of a challenge to get it back, or at least take some time to get it back. So I'll leave that up to you, Mr. Contractor, Ms. Tree Service, which is very rare, but something like that. I'll leave it up to you to make that decision. I would encourage you to do so because I think it's worth the risk because of the amount of additional business it can generate, because the GBP will perform significantly better, et cetera. So getting back to what I was saying, Yext Power Listings, perfect for that, right? Because Yext Power Listings, we can very quickly update roughly with the published street address in the United States, roughly 60 business directory listings on the higher authority business directories. So very quick, well, I say very quickly, it's 3 to 4 weeks. We can get all of those kind of citations or business directories to sync with the new data with the published street address. And then we extract all those page URLs. We link out to them with Google Business Posts before we trigger before we make the change from a service area business to a published street address business, right? We use the Google Business Profile to link out to the citations that have validating signals at name, address, phone number, and website information, specifically the published street address, right? So put them in the ID page, put them in the same as attributes, do all the things that I just talked about in the previous question. But we publish a press release, preferably a premium press release that announces within the content body of the press release, it has a reference to the street address. No kidding. You do all of these things ahead of time so that when you go to make that change, Google's already got, and it's not that you just published all this information. Google is aware of it, right? That's why, again, you use Google Business Posts, the schema, the ID page, all of those is where you would take the press releases, the branded assets, the citation URLs, link out to them with Google Business Posts, same as attributes in the local business schema, put them into the ID page, all of that stuff before requesting that change, that edit to the GBP. Does that make sense? Because then when you do it, most of the time, in my experience, most of the time, it goes through just like that. Well, it usually takes 10 or 15 minutes. And sometimes it'll get stuck in whatever the pending phase, the edit pending phase. For sometimes it'll get stuck for days, but usually it will end up going through, just to be clear. Oh, and by the way, one other thing is I would recommend before doing any changing of it's from service area business or publishing a street address. Um, you know what? I haven't tested that. Excuse me. I was going to say like to change the name or to change a URL. What I recommend is instead of doing it in the GBP itself, you actually do it as a suggestion from a local guide account. But I've not, you can't, I don't think you can suggest, and I've not tried it, suggest a business be changed from a service area business to a public street address. I'm quite sure you can't do that. But what I was going to say was I've done things like change names. For example, Albemarle Felling Pro used to be Tree Care HQ Local. That's what we were just looking at here a moment ago, right? This used to be Tree Care HQ Local, and I changed that to Albemarle Felling Pro. And the way that I did it was exactly what I just mentioned a moment ago. I've got Yext Power Listings for this. In fact, I'll pause the screen again and I'll prove it. And then I did a press release. And what I ended up doing, oops, sorry. And then what I ended up doing was, there it is, Felling Pro. I ended up publishing a press release and where is there it is, right there. Here it is. All right, so see, I'm in SEMrush and I've got Albemarle Felling Pro right here for Yext Power Listings. That's local listings. See, it's like I said, it's about 60, right? There's 59 connected because it's a published street address. So I did all of that first, and then when I went to go change this from Tree Care HQ Charlottesville to Albemarle Felling Pro, I did that as a suggested edit through my Google local guide profile, like Bradley Benner's profile. I'm like a local guide level 7, I guess. And so that's what I did. I just went in and suggested an edit, and it took about, I don't know, 2 or 3 days, and the name was changed. All right. And so again, if you can create enough validating evidence, supporting evidence, all that we just talked about in the first two comments or questions, excuse me, were about that. Enough branded location authority. So if you have enough, and how do you build branded location authority? By producing more evidence of it. Right? And that's all we got to do. And we can manufacture that evidence, is what I'm saying. We've got to make sure that it's discovered, though, too. So it's kind of a two-step process. Manufacture the evidence, make sure that they're aware of it. Does that make sense? Anyway, good question again.